Let me ask you a question. What determines whether you feel happy or sad right now? What determines if somebody comes up to you and says they hate your guts, whether or not you laugh or whether or not you feel really rejected? What determines whether right now, if I ask you, are you successful, how do you answer? You say you are or you're not. What determines whether you feel like you're successful or not? If I asked you, do you have a great body, how would you respond? And my question is, how do you know what the answer is? What makes you say, yeah, I got a great body, or no, I don't? Do you feel fulfilled at the end of the day? Do you feel like your day was invested, or do you feel drained? If I asked you about your relationship, would you say you're in love or you're lost? And my question is, where do you get the answers? What the heck do I mean by this? I mean, when I ask you that question, how do you know what to say? The answer to your questions always come back to one thing. You have to answer them based on your own personal standards. In other words, if I say, do you have a great body? You have to answer that compared to what? Compared to your standards for what a great body would be. Does everyone hold the same standard? You and I both know that's not true. And the different standards that we hold govern not only how we feel, but also how we behave, ultimately what we do and who we become in our lives. Our beliefs about what is good and what is bad, what we should do and what we must do, these personal standards I call rules. And our rules basically determine when we get pain and when we get pleasure in our life. Our rules are our judge and jury. And here's the scary part. You didn't install your own rules. In fact, they're controlling how you feel right now about virtually everything in your life, and for the most part, you probably aren't in control of them. This session today is designed to give you a clear awareness of what rules are, what their impact is on your life, and how you can change them and in a moment change your entire life. Are you really a successful person? Now you may say absolutely, or you may say, well, kinda, or you may say no. The answer you're giving me is based on this rule, this thing in the back of your head that says, in order to be successful, you have to do this, 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 and that. And it varies from person to person massively. I mean, do you know someone personally that you can think of who you think is real successful, but if you spend time with them, you found out they don't think they're successful? I mean, by your standards, you think, wow, this person's doing really great. They're making a difference in the world. They have a great family, great friends. They have a great career. But they don't feel like they're successful because they're not making $10 million a year, or they haven't gotten 8 billion people to change the way they think. These sound exaggerated, but in the real world, and I'm working with thousands of people, I can tell you that most people have a set of rules that control how they think and how they feel, that make it really hard to feel good and real easy to feel bad. And that's a great way to make sure for the rest of your life, no matter what you do, you could be winning and feel like you're losing, because the scorecard you're using is unfair. It's unfair to you, and it may be unfair to your kids and to your spouse. It may be unfair to the people you work with in your environment, and I want you to be able to change that. So are you successful? Answer the question if you would. If you said yes, my question to you is, well, how do you know you're successful? Remember, how do you know is the way to find out your rules to virtually anything. What does it take for you to be successful? What has to happen in order for you to feel successful? And again, I'll repeat this many times because this is the second question to find out somebody's rules. What has to happen in order for you to feel blank? So if you want to find out somebody's rules for success, you'd say, what has to happen in order for you to feel successful? If you want to find out their rules for being a great lover, what has to happen in order for you to feel like you're a great lover? If you want to know the rules for being intelligent, what has to happen for you to feel you're intelligent? So let's go back to the question. What has to happen in order for you to feel like you're successful? People who tell me they're not successful in answering this question invariably have a long list of things that have to happen in order for them to feel successful. They have to be incredibly successful financially. They have to have unlimited income. They have to change the world. They have to have their kids be absolutely perfect all the time. They have to be in an emotional state of happiness at every moment from the time they wake up to the time they fall asleep. And if they're missing any of these things, they feel totally depressed and they feel like a failure. People who say they're successful usually have criteria, rules that are achievable. And the people that feel most successful have the rules that are the simplest and the ones that are within their control. The point is this: we can set up the rules of our life so we feel pain all the time, or we can set up so we feel pleasure consistently. I have a new definition of success. It's quite different than what I started out with several years ago. My idea of success used to be like this man's. I had to change the entire world overnight, have everyone be happy instantaneously because I showed up. Now, obviously, that's a great way to make yourself stressed out of your mind. What I've really decided now is success is real simple. That is, you're successful when you live your life in a way where you experience tons of pleasure in your life and very little pain. And when the way you live your life also causes the people around you to consistently feel tons of pleasure and very little pain. That's my idea of contribution. That's what we're really going to go for in this tape today. Now, let me ask you a question, though. What's the purpose of these rules? Why do we have rules in the first place? If rules can create so much pain, why even have them? Well, rules are important. Rules help your brain to answer the question it's constantly asking. It's, what does this mean? Is this going to mean pain in my life or pleasure? If somebody comes and says, I love you, you got to ask, what does this mean, pain or pleasure? If they say, I hate you, what does this mean, pain or pleasure? If I say, hey, will you go skydiving with me? Your brain's going to ask, what is this going to mean, pain or pleasure? If you say, yeah, I want to go skydiving, it's because your brain has decided that going skydiving means some kind of pleasure, some kind of thrill, some kind of adventure, something that you're really up for. If you say, no, I don't want to go skydiving, it's because your brain has decided that going skydiving probably means pain. It means potential death. You'd be maimed. There'd be some major problem. So our brain is asking this question at every moment. The only way your brain can get an answer is it's got one of two choices. Either it can go through every memory bank you have, every single situation you've ever had in your life, and analyze, well, gosh, in this situation it was good, in that situation it was bad. In this situation somebody said they loved me, but later on they did something where they rejected me. In this situation they said they loved me and it felt good. If it has to analyze every single experience you've ever had, it'll take your brain forever to decide what things mean, whether it's going to mean pain or pleasure, and what to do to get more pleasure or to avoid pain. So what rules do is they're a shortcut for the brain. They help us to make quick decisions as to what things mean and what we should do to get what we want out of our life. So their value is they allow us to speed up the process of evaluating how to make our life work. I mean, when someone smiles, your brain doesn't have to go through a long set of calculations to figure out what that means. You have a rule. Somebody smiles, it means they're happy. It means they like you. It means they're outgoing. It means they're friendly. It means no pain and probably some pleasure in your relationship with them. If somebody looks at you with a frown or they look at you with a deep, harsh stare, you have rules about what that means, and those rules answer the question instantaneously. The challenges that come with rules are many, and we're going to talk about those here and how to make sure that we lessen the challenge and maximize the benefit of them. But the most important thing to remember about rules is simply this. Rules are the controlling factor of at which moments you get pain and at which moments you get pleasure. And remember, everything you and I do as human beings, we do out of our need to avoid pain or a desire to gain pleasure. Everything. You're listening to this tape for those reasons. Either because you thought, hey, this will be entertaining or I'll get something valuable that will enhance my life. That's pleasure. Or you thought, man, I'm feeling like heck and I really want to get a boost. I want to get out of this pain. I want to avoid future pain. I want to learn some of these things. That is the drive behind our behavior. So our rules determine when we're going to get that pain or pleasure. And it's important to set up our rules in a way that empowers us and doesn't disempower us. Let me give you an example. A very good friend of mine is an extremely attractive woman. She's taken incredible care of herself throughout the years. She's fit, she's vibrant, she's strong. Now what's interesting is she has a best friend who's massively overweight. And she looks at her friend, our mutual friend, who's fit and thin, and she says, gosh, how come she's so lucky? She is not lucky. The difference in these two women is only one difference: rules. My friend who's thin and slender and attractive, her body's in shape. She's that way for one reason. She has a set of rules, very specific rules of what she must do every single day so that she can have these feelings, this body, this vibrancy for the rest of her entire life. Those rules include things like every single day I must exercise. And she has specific types of exercises she'll do. And she doesn't miss. And so her body reflects that. She has rules about eating that are very precise. She must eat nutritious foods each day. She must eat foods that are fuel foods. She must eat low-fat foods. She must eat a comfortable amount of food. She has this huge list. When I ask her friend who's overweight, what must you do to be healthy each day? She said, well, basically eat good and, think right and, do the right things. See, with rules that general, there's no way she's going to be able to move forward and be as healthy as she wants. Now, my friend who's fit and healthy, when she doesn't follow one of her rules, guess what her brain gives her? Take a wild guess. Pain. The greatest source of pain is the pain inside ourselves when we violate our own personal standards. And she wants to avoid that pain, plus she wants the pleasure of feeling good. Not just the way she looks, but the self-esteem of knowing she keeps her commitments with herself. That makes her entire life feel better, not just physically, but emotionally, socially, spiritually. The woman who's overweight, because she has such weak rules, she doesn't give herself pain. If she overeats, that doesn't break one of her rules. If she doesn't exercise, that doesn't break a rule. So she never gets pain along the way. She has something much more treacherous. She experiences the massive pain of looking at the result of not holding any rules about health. Rules can empower and they can disempower. So let's make some distinctions on how to utilize them effectively. First of all, where did rules come from, by the way? Where do you think you get your rules? Did you sit down one day and say, I think these are the best rules I could set up for success so I'd feel successful? These are the best rules I could have so I'd follow through and really be healthy? These are the best rules I could have on how to make my relationships work? There are very few people that we could say this is true for. And most of them are people that have attended my seminars where we've actually done this and analyzed our rules. But I'll tell you where most of them have come from. They've come from punishment reward. See, you grew up in an environment, and if you did certain things that, let's say, your mom liked, boy, you got acknowledged. You got feedback, physical feedback, verbal feedback, emotional feedback, and you wanted more of that. If you did things that broke your mom's rules, you got pain. Either physical pain, or verbal pain, or the pain of being ignored. Those experiences shaped some of our basic rules, and of course they didn't end at home. Just like values, they were expanded by the impact of your friends. They're expanded by the impact of how you grew up in school, and what you got rewarded for and what you got punished for. Also, a lot of our rules we've modeled from other people. A lot of times when I talk to people, they say, gosh, I'm just like my dad, I'm just like my mom. What they're really saying is, I look at my life the same way. I judge myself by the same standards. I use the same rules. And sometimes the rules their parents had made their parents unhappy. And now they're living by the same level of unhappiness because they're living by the same type of rules. And by the way, some of our rules we've gotten out of rebelling. Somebody had rules we hated, so we changed the rules. Said, I'm never going to live that way. I'm never going to put up with that kind of thing. And we did it out of our pain. I know I was talking to a woman on an airplane recently, sitting next to me, and I was talking to her about, what are some of the things that are most important to her in a relationship with a man, because she's thinking of getting married. Now, that it might be nice before you got married to find out what your rules are for someone you're going to be in a relationship with. Because whether you're aware of it or not, you're judging other people, you're holding other people to the rules that you have. And you may not have told those rules to anybody, but you expect them to comply. And you know what? One of her most important rules is, she said, well, a husband must work hard every day. I said, well, that's kind of interesting. That's not something he should do. That's something he must do. She goes, he must do that or I can't have him in my life. I said, well, what if he was like independently wealthy and he didn't have to work hard every day? She said, I still wanted to work hard every day. And I had to try and dig in there. Now, bear in mind, what are rules for? Rules are things we've linked up in our head because we say, if I have this rule, it'll help me avoid pain or it'll give me pleasure. As I started asking her a question, we found out what the situation was. She grew up in her family and watched her mother go through tremendous pain because her father never worked. Her mother literally supported the entire family because her father always had excuses for not working. He literally didn't work for years. And her mother broke down emotionally. She felt so sorry for her. So for her, she's got a rule that says husbands must work because if they don't, it equals lots of what? Pain. Now this happens on all kinds of levels in virtually every area of our life. So a lot of our rules have come out of our painful past, and some of our rules have come together because we say, hey, if I do this, I think I'll get pleasure. So let's take a look at the challenges that rules have. And what I want to do really is give you 7 distinctions about rules that can be major challenges or they can empower you depending upon how you use them. Here's the first most important thing to realize about this thing called rules. Now again, remember what rules are. Rules are our beliefs about what we must or what we should do in order to have a certain experience of pleasure or pain. Rules tell us, if I do this and this and this, then I deserve pain. If I do this and this and this, then I deserve pleasure. They determine what our brain is going to do to give us those sensations. Here's the first point for us to remember about rules. Every upset you've ever had in your life with another person has been a rules upset. Now think about what I just said. Every time you've been upset with another human being, the upset has not been about the other human being. It's been an upset about the differences you have between your rules about how things should or must be, how people should or must be treated, how someone should or must communicate to you, how that's different than somebody else's rules. Now see if you buy that idea. I think you're going to find it's accurate if you look at your real life. Think of the last time you're really upset with somebody. Now I know you've never been upset with anybody, but if you once had been upset, let's think of such an example. Now, as you think back at that situation, what were you really upset about? You say, well, I was upset with a person. No, you weren't upset with a person. You were upset about an issue. You're upset about something that was done or not done. People get very upset when their rules get violated. See, some people have rules about respect. And the rules for respect are, if you respect me, you never raise your voice. But they may be in a relationship with somebody who has a rule that says, if I respect somebody, I share with all my feelings and all my emotions exactly how I feel in the moment with all my intensity, because otherwise I wouldn't be respecting you, I wouldn't be telling you how I really feel, I wouldn't be being truthful. Can you imagine how these people feel when they get together? By the way, this was my wife and I when we first got together. We had radically different ideas of rules. Why? I grew up in an environment where we got a lot of pain if we weren't honest, if we didn't tell the whole truth, if we didn't express ourselves. Trying to walk out of the room without finishing something, boy, that wasn't allowed. That was massive pain. And even though it didn't feel good to have to say how you felt in the moment, because you knew you might get in trouble, you had to communicate it. Becky grew up in a family where the rules were quite different. The rules were real clear. If you don't have anything good to say, you don't say anything at all. And if you have respect for someone, you never raise your voice. And if somebody ever raises their voice to you, the only way to keep your own self-respect is get up and leave the room. Can you imagine how these two rules clashed in a personal relationship? We drove each other almost crazy. We almost didn't get married because of this. Not because we didn't love each other, but because we had such conflicting rules. See, rules determine where we go, who we are, who we can even be with, whether we're happy or sad. I'm curious, what does it take for you to feel like you're respected by someone? What are your rules? You may say, well, I don't have any rules. Oh, yes, you do. You may not be aware of them consciously, but you do have them. So think for a second. What does it take for you to feel like you're respected by someone? Well, you might say, well, they need to not ever, make me wrong, or they need to respect my opinions. Well, how do you know if they respect your opinions? If they just sit there and listen? For some people, that's all it takes. For other people, they have to actively agree. Some people do not feel respected unless someone agrees with their view. Some people, I say, what does it take for you to feel respected? They say, well, I have to feel like this person agrees with me. Isn't that interesting? What's their chances of feeling disrespected by someone? Very good, because lots of people have different views other than yours. So we have to make sure that we're aware if our rules are appropriate or not. And if we're going to work with other people, we want, when we get in the game, to understand other people's rules, because there's a good chance we're going to have some differences. The more we understand what a person's rules are, what their standards are, what they really need to feel fulfilled, then we can work on meeting those needs, and vice versa. We can teach them what we need to feel fulfilled. Let's take a look at how rules impact even more personally in a relationship. Let's look at the emotion of love. What are the rules you have for knowing somebody loves you? Well, somebody's rules, if you ask, what does it take for you to know somebody loves you? They say, well, if they smile at me. Some people have to be told they're loved or they won't believe you love them. Did you see the movie Ghost? There's an interesting thing about rules in the very beginning. The main characters are played by Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. And early in the film, Demi Moore turns to him and she says, I love you. And he turns back to her and says, ditto. And she finally gets upset about it. And she says, you never say you love me. That bothers me. I don't feel like you really love me, And he says, I love you, but I just don't say it. That's not what it's about. I'm not about saying I love you. Everybody says they love you, and they don't mean it. Here are two people, and they're having an argument already. What are they arguing over? They're arguing over their own personal standards on what it takes for them to feel loved. Some people don't know they're loved unless you touch them a certain way. And you think that they know you love them because you tell them all the time. It won't do it, not at the deepest level of love. So the value of realizing this first distinction, that almost everyone you meet is going to have rules that are different than you have, is that with that awareness, you can now dig in and find out what somebody's rules are. And now you can meet their deepest needs. See, if you love someone and you say, I love you, but that's not what they need, their rule is they have to be touched, and you don't touch them, then you're not going to give them what you really want to give them. In fact, if you want to make someone feel like they're loved, whose rules do you use to decide how to make them feel loved? Well, you and I both know the answer. We use our own rules. So if you're the kind of person that, wants to be hugged, what do you tend to do? You tend to hug that person. But maybe they need to hear, I love you, and you're just hugging them. And they need to hear it in a certain tone of voice, and you don't duplicate that, because that's not what you need. The classic thing I hear in personal relationships all the time is, especially when they've gone through threshold, or the relationship's about to end, and I'll hear the man or woman say, I gave them my whole life, I gave them everything. I gave them everything that I could possibly give them as a human being. And invariably, you know what really is true? They gave them everything except what the other person really wanted and needed. They met their own rules. They didn't meet their partner's rules. And if you want someone else to feel loved, you can't do it in your way. You got to do it in the way that meets their needs. I'll never forget, Becky and I were in the south of France. And one day, I came out of the shower and she handed me a towel. And I dried off, and I started to dry my hair. And then she handed me the hairspray. And quite honestly, I didn't really notice. I was in deep thought, thinking about what I was going to be doing next. And she turned to me and she said, you don't realize all the things I do for you. You don't realize how much I love you. When I give you the hairspray, that means I love you. When I give you the towel, it means I love you. Well, you know what? I'm real appreciative if she gives me the towel and the hairspray, but quite honestly, I just as easy get it myself. It's not one of my rules for love. To me, it doesn't take any thought for me to grab the towel or to reach for the hairspray. So quite honestly, I didn't value it the same way she did. But for her, that's a rule of love. Now, check this out. I don't usually hand her the towel or the hairspray. Guess what? That means that she feels a little like she's missing out. In fact, she said, boy, I would just feel so loved if you would give me a towel and you'd think to have the forethought to hand me the hairspray right when I'm done drying my hair and give it to me at that moment. I said, you got to be kidding me. That would make you feel loved? She said, yeah. I said, that doesn't make me feel loved. What makes me feel loved is when you say, I love you, in that certain tone. And when you say, I love you tone, and I just melt. That makes me feel it. Or when we hug and stuff, but not hairspray. She goes, yes, it is. That's love. So I started laughing. I said, okay. And sure enough, now I catch her. If I'm in there and I see her in the shower, I hand her the towel and I said, this means love. And every time she hands me the towel now, I grab it and I say, I know this means love. I'm going to give her a big kiss. And what it allows us to do is allows us to appreciate people and understand people's behavior and connect closer with people. But realize, if you've got an upset with somebody, that upset is about breaking somebody's rules. Check this out, though. Have you ever been upset with yourself? Of course you have. Why? Why were you upset with yourself? Answer's simple. You broke your own rules. You've got rules for yourself about how you need to be, how you need to treat people, how much you need to grow, how much you think you need to earn, the kind of difference you need to make in the world. And when you feel like you've broken one of your own rules, I don't care how simple it is. Maybe it's like you're not to overeat, but you do. You give yourself pain. Now, some people give themselves a little pain because it's not that big a rule for them. For some people, certain rules that we break them, we beat ourselves up for days. Haven't you ever done that? I know I've been guilty of it. And it isn't always bad. Sometimes it's good to get a little pain because then you don't want to do that again. But the point is, if you ever feel angry or upset with yourself or someone else, realize it's a rules upset. And you know what that'll help you to do? You'll stop making the person wrong. You'll say, you know what? We just have a difference in rules. My expectations are that if you respect me, you do this and this and this. I know those aren't your rules. Tell me what your rules are. Let me understand them. Can we make a deal? Would you be willing to do this? Because it would make me feel respected. And I'd be willing to do that for you. You can change a relationship just by getting clear on the rules and be willing to play by them. Here's the second key distinction about rules. Remember that people's rules are not necessarily consistent. What do I mean by that? People have totally conflicting rules. You ever notice that? I thought that person is so darn inconsistent. Have you ever noticed that in yourself? Have you ever found yourself saying, well, I don't believe you should ever cheat on anything. And then one day, when you went to fill out your IRS form, you thought, well, that's basically what this means. Were you ever guilty of that in your past? Now, I won't tell the IRS, but were you ever guilty? Did you ever stretch it a little bit? See, the bottom line is all of us have these little sub-rules at times, and I'm for getting rid of them for the most part. There are places where sub-rules work, but let me give you an example. Let's say you and I want to play a game together, a game in life. Well, let's say the game, for the sake of the metaphor, is baseball. And I turn to you and say, hey, let's go out and play baseball together. You like to play baseball? And you go, yeah. You know the rules? Yeah. You do know the rules. Let's make sure we know. Oh, sure. There's 3 outs and you get these hits around. Okay, great. We understand. Let's play. And so we go out there, you and I, and we start playing together. And things are going great. We're having a good time. And all of a sudden, I'm up to bat. I got one man on, there's 1 out, and I had a high pop fly. Now, my rules, and the rules you seem to agree to, were, if you catch a ball, I'm out. If you drop the ball, I'm safe. Which means, if you drop the ball, my guy on base is probably going to score and I'm going to win the game. So sure enough, I'm running like crazy. I watch you drop the ball. I'm excited. I'm on first base. My guy scores. I think I won the game. You come to me and say, no, you're out. I said, what are you talking about? You drop the ball. If you drop the ball, then I'm safe. Then I win. See, that's the rule. Rules are often language that way, by the way. They're if-then. If you love me, then you never raise your voice. If you respect me, then you do this. If-then. So the bottom line is you say, no. That's true most of the time. Except, I go, wait. What do you mean except? We agreed on the rules when we started this thing. Everybody knows what the rules are. I go, no, there's this other special rule. It's this thing we call this infield fly rule. And I said, I've never heard of this rule. I said, oh yeah, everybody knows this rule. Everybody plays by this rule. Here's how it works. See, if you have 1 man on or less, and you have 1 out or less, and I drop the ball, you're still out. Now I go, no way. There's no way. You can't bring up and make up these rules after we start the game. Now, while I'm talking about baseball, haven't you ever experienced this in a business relationship or in a personal relationship where you thought you guys knew what the rules were and all of a sudden they come up, yeah, but, or yeah, that's true most of the time, except, or like, I love you, except when you do this and this and this, then I get really angry with you. We all have these subsets of rules and you have them within yourself just like I do. And they make us feel inconsistent. The point is simply this. If you're going to go through life expecting people to behave consistent with their rules all the time, you're going to be disappointed. Because you don't even follow that. Think about it. Inside yourself, you've got conflicting rules. I'll give you some fun, simple ones. You were taught things like, look before you leap. You were also taught, he who hesitates is lost. Now, how does your brain figure that one out? Or you got things like, absence makes the heart grow fonder. You also have things like, out of sight, out of mind. And your brain is not sure what to do when you got these conflicting rules. And I'm talking about just simple, fun beliefs. Remember where rules came from. You had some pain in your life, and your brain said, I don't want to have this pain ever again. What's the rule? The rule for this is don't ever trust people again, because your brain linked up, I trusted somebody and got hurt. So if you trust people, then you'll be hurt. So you get those rules is don't trust anybody. Now, how does that affect your life? Well, the problem is you're going to start to use that rule, and then you're going to think, if I don't trust anybody, I can't have a relationship. Now you have a conflict. You have rules that sometimes you'll use and sometimes you won't use them. You have some rules that are must rules for you and some rules that are shoulds for you. There are some rules that you will never violate. I call them threshold rules. For example, if I ask my friend who's really fit, what must you never do if you're going to be healthy? She said, well, you must never smoke. You must never violate your body with drugs. You must never. She has all these must nevers. When I ask her friend who's overweight, what must you never do in order to be healthy? She looked at me with a blank stare. She had no must nevers. So she's never in a position of giving herself major pain. She said, I think there are a lot of things you shouldn't do if you want to be healthy. You shouldn't overeat, and you shouldn't go without exercising, for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I said, well, do you do those things? She goes, well, yeah. I said, do you feel good about it? She goes, no, I don't feel good about it. So she gets a little pain, but not like threshold pain. For example, what would be a must-never rule for you in a relationship? If you said a husband or a wife must never what? A lot of people say must never have an extramarital affair. Some people, that's a should not. Would that affect their behavior in the long term? You bet. In fact, when I get people in relationships, if they're having upsets, invariably it's because they share a lot of rules, but for one person it's a must never or it's a must always, and for the other person it's a should. It's an important distinction then in the second point to realize people have conflicting rules. They have them within themselves and they're going to have them with you. And by the way, we all know who has the right rules, don't we? Who has the right rules? Whose rules are the correct rules? That's right. Yours are the correct rules. You know yours are the right ones. But the problem is the person you're dealing with in the real world has the exact same feeling inside. So maybe if we realize our differences, again, we can have that awareness, and instead of making people wrong, we'll realize that it's just different upbringing, different backgrounds, different rules, and we'll try and look for a compromise that works for both of us. In addition, if we realize we have these conflicting rules within ourselves, with that awareness, we can begin to pay attention and we can begin to make new decisions and create rules that really unify us. So we don't feel like we're being pulled apart in our life. That unification gives power. That unification creates peace inside. And that unification creates a lot more happiness. Here's the third key point about rules. Remember this. Rules cause us to go on automatic pilot. See, rules are designed to speed the process up of making decisions about what things mean. Does this person love me or not? Is this dangerous or not? If I do this, will I succeed or fail? We want answers quickly so we can respond, so we can move forward. The challenge, though, is in doing that, we simplify our world. We start going on automatic pilot, or we start reacting instead of responding. Rules cause us to delete a good deal of our world. For example, if you have a rule that says, if somebody raises their voice, it means they don't respect me. And what you're going to notice is this person raised their voice and you're going to be all in reaction to the fact they don't respect you, and you're deleting the fact that maybe an hour earlier they were telling you how much they loved you, or they were complimenting you in front of somebody else, or they were trying to learn something from you. You're deleting all the other pieces of evidence that would cause you to know, hey, this person really does respect me. So be careful with your rules. Remember, your rules often make the world black and white, and the world isn't black and white. There's a lot of gray out there. You got to be careful to make sure those rules are empowering you by looking at things, and instead of reacting, if something happens that violates one of your rules, stop. Take a breath and ask yourself the question, am I reacting to this or am I responding to this situation? Is my rule appropriate in this situation? Are there other ways of looking at this that if I looked at it another way, I would feel respected, or I would feel loved, or I would feel like things really could work between us? Don't let your rules control you. Make sure you control your rules. And let me offer you a little idea that might help you in relationships. If you feel like we're violated and you're real righteous because this person's doing the wrong things and they've broken the rules and they're the rules that everybody else has. Hey, by the way, did you ever notice in an argument, people can always show that there are 20 other people that believe the same thing they believe. We use social proof, other people to back up that our rules are the right rules. Hey, you can get people to back up the idea that killing people is the way to live. What other people believe doesn't matter. What matters is what empowers or disempowers you in a relationship. And I offer you this possible thought the next time you start feeling righteous. Ask yourself this question. Do I want to be right or do I want to be in love? That might be a good thing to consider in the future. Being right rarely makes a relationship better. Being in love, you may become more understanding, and you may just discover the difference in rules is not as important as the commitment you have for each other, your love, and your personal and spiritual growth that you're sharing together. Here's the fourth point about rules. Take the time to evaluate your rules and discover, are they empowering or disempowering you as a human being? This is a theme I've talked with you about constantly throughout our time together today, but I want to make it absolutely clear what I mean. When I ask you, are you successful? If you don't feel successful, the first question you should ask yourself is why? What are my rules for success, and are they appropriate? Are they empowering me in my life? For example, some people's definition of success is they never make a mistake. That's a totally disempowering rule. It guarantees that you're never going to feel successful long term. It'd be important for you to be aware of that, to see that that rule creates pain, and to sit down and say, what's a better way to measure whether I'm successful or not? What are other disempowering rules people can have? Remember again, what is a rule? A rule is a set of criteria, things that you have to see, hear, or do in order to feel like you're intelligent, you're successful, you're loved, etc. You know what some people have to have happen in order for them to feel they're intelligent? They have to feel like they always have the right answer the moment it's needed. Gosh, if I thought that, I'd be pretty stressed out of my mind. I forget what I'm supposed to do all the time, don't you? But I don't question whether I'm intelligent based on that. Some people, in order to feel confident, have to know what's going to happen before it occurs. Well, there's no way you can ever do that long term. Maybe you get lucky once in a while, but life changes. Things occur. You can't be prepared for everything. See, my rule in that area is, in order for me to feel confident, I just have to remember something. Whatever comes up, I can deal with it. And you can do the same. Just by changing a belief, by changing a rule, we can start to feel confident immediately. Some people, in order to feel like they're competent, have to feel like they've done something over and over and over again, and every time they've done it, they've been perfect. Well, gosh, can you imagine? You probably never feel competent. Because I'm sure there's a time when you've done something and you didn't do it perfectly. We're human beings, and yet this person will never have that sense of confidence that comes from feeling competent. With a set of rules like this, a set of beliefs like this, you wouldn't want to begin things. You wouldn't want to start something new because, of course, you wouldn't feel competent at it. You'd feel inferior. And when you feel inferior, you don't behave very effectively. You certainly wouldn't be perfect. And, of course, all you would link to that situation is pain. My view of competence is different. My rule says if I've ever done anything like this and pulled it off, then I'm competent probably in this as well. I just need to do it once or twice. So that makes me more empowered. It causes me to really go for it. Again, we want to develop rules that cause us to take action, that cause us to feel the experiences of joy, that cause us to follow through, not ones that stop us. I'll tell you a classic example of one that destroys people in relationships. When you look at somebody and they're not in a personal relationship and they say they want to be in one, man-woman relationship, let's say. Why aren't they in a relationship? The answer is really simple. They have rules that make it difficult to stay in a relationship. There was a woman in a date with Destiny recently, and she was an extremely attractive woman, and there were several gentlemen in the audience that were trying to get her attention. And it became very obvious that she totally turned men off around her, and yet she said she wanted to be in a relationship. Well, I found out why. Her rules were simply this. For her to feel attractive, what had to happen was you had to pursue her constantly, and she had to reject you. And even though she rejected you, you had to keep coming back for more. You had to keep being attracted to her, trying to break down her walls. If you kept working at it like that, that made her feel incredibly attracted to you, like you were a powerful man. But you know what's interesting? She also had a rule that said, if you did that for more than a month, she lost her attraction to you. So guess what happens? Very few men, first of all, would take her rejection and keep on going. The few that did and kept on going, she'd feel attracted to for a while, but at the period of about a month, if they kept pursuing her, she lost her feelings of attraction. And if they stopped pursuing her, she lost her feelings of attraction. So basically, she didn't stay attracted to any man for more than a month. How's that for a set of disempowering rules? So again, you need to analyze what your rules are. Just ask yourself the question, what does it take in order for me to feel like I'm successful? What does it take in order for me to feel intelligent, for me to feel like I'm loved? What does it take for me to be attracted to another person? And then ask yourself, are these rules appropriate? I have a question for you, by the way. Is it possible that you could be having a great experience and feel lousy about it just based on your rules? Is it possible, for example, you could be helping other people, making a difference, and not feel it? Sure, because you got to have such stringent rules about how you had to do something perfectly that you wouldn't get the joy from it. So realize the power that occurs when we make a shift in our rules. When you find your rules are disempowering, change them. And all it takes to change them is to make some new decisions about how to define success, love, respect, or any other aspect of your life. Here are the final 3 points. Number 5, don't expect people to live by your rules if you don't tell them what they are. Gosh, we've talked about this a little bit already, but I want to reinforce it. If you want to take control of your life, if you want to do well in business, if you want to be a great negotiator, if you want to be able to have impact on your children, if you want to be close to your spouse, then for gosh sakes, tell them up front what your rules are. If I want to go into business with someone, the most important thing I do in the beginning of that relationship is let them know what the rules are from my perspective and see what their rules are. Say, listen, what does it take for you to know that our relationship's working? How often do we have to communicate? What's necessary? I'll give you an example. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a pretty well-known celebrity, and we were talking back and forth about different things and about rules, and he was telling me he didn't have very many friends. And I said, well, I see all these people around you who really do care about you. I'm sure you have lots of friends. I think you've just got rules that are pretty stringent about friendship. Maybe your friends aren't meeting your rules because you aren't telling them what your rules for friendship are. He said, well, I guess I really don't even know what they are consciously. I said, that's pretty clear. And one of his number one rules are, if you're really a friend, you talk at least 2 or 3 times a week. Now, gosh, I have friends all over the world, people who I love. Some of my best friends sometimes I don't talk to for a month just because of the intensity of my life and how I'm living and what I'm doing. And I also get an average of 100 phone calls a day. There's no physical way I could talk to everybody 2 or 3 times a week. There just aren't enough hours in the day. So the bottom line with this person, I said, well, do you feel like I'm your friend? And this person said, well, yeah, you're my friend. I know you're my friend, but, sometimes it doesn't feel like it because we don't talk enough. I said, wow, I never knew that. See, if you don't tell me that's your rule, how am I supposed to know? I said, my rules for friendship are real simple. Love me and I love you. And whenever we get together, let's be absolutely with each other. Let's care about each other. Let's always be there for each other when we're needed. And let's think of fun things to do with each other. But I don't have a timeline. I don't care if it's once a week, once a day, once a month, once a year. All I care is that caring and support for each other. That mutual feeling of growth and expansion. So my rules are a little bit easier. So guess what? I have tons of friends. I have lots of friends. He has a long list, and I only gave you one of them, and that's why he felt like he didn't have very many friends. So think about it up front. And by the way, even though you try and clarify all the rules up front in a relationship, you're going to screw up. You're going to forget to communicate one of your rules, and you're going to feel upset about someone doing something or saying something that you didn't tell someone you wouldn't appreciate them doing. You assume they would know. Never assume when it comes to rules. Communicate. That's the key. I'll give you an example. Did you ever have a friend who told you something? They didn't tell you it was private. And so you thought it was a great example or a good idea. And so you try to help somebody else by sharing that experience with somebody else, a stranger. And then this friend of yours found out about it later on and got extremely upset. I've certainly had that happen. And you know what? It happened more than once. So I finally realized, hey, I need to ask people permission. Can I tell the story of what's happened with you so that I meet their rules? Some people say, oh, I don't care. Sure. Some people say, no, I'd rather you didn't. That's why it's important that when you get in a game, quote unquote, with someone, find out as many of the rules as possible. Remember this too. So much pain in our lives comes from the fact that we have expectations that aren't met. So if you let people know what your rules are in advance, you handle those expectations up front. Last night I was talking with Ken Blanchard. Ken and Marge and Becky and I got together and we had a great dinner and we were sharing ideas back and forth and we were talking about rules. And Ken shared with me the story of a couple of years back when he coached a soccer team. Now, Ken doesn't know anything about soccer, but he decided he wanted to coach a soccer team, and he got together with this other man who was a great coach. I think he said he was from Peru. I may be wrong about that, but the point was this man didn't speak very much English, but he was a phenomenal coach on the skills of soccer. So Ken said, I'll tell you what, you take on the skills side, I'll take on the human side, and we'll make this thing go. But we're going to make this really fun. So they got together, they got a team, but they didn't do what all the traditional coaches do, because Ken's real turned off by all these parents where it's more important for them to win the game than it is for the kids. And so he decided that instead of going with all the other coaches and going to the draft, that's where traditionally all these kids go out and try out and all these parents sit back who own teams and they try to figure out who they're going to try and get, the best kids. They said, you know what? They told the other coaches, we don't want to go to the draft. You guys just give us whatever kids you want. They said, what? You're not going to the draft? What are you, crazy? You have to do that. You must do that. Based on whose rules? Their rules, not Ken's rules. So Ken said, tell you what, it doesn't matter to me. It's fine. We'll just give us whoever you want to. Well, sure enough, in the middle of the frenzy of the draft, all these different coaches start picking the best kids, and they start feeling a little guilty. So they said, well, we got to give them some good kids. So they gave Ken and his partner 2 kids who were really good, but nobody wanted these kids. And the reason was these were real troublemakers. They were always bad sports or creating problems on the team. They didn't listen to instruction. So they figured, okay, they're good. We can feel like we've met the rules of fairness, but we don't want these kids. Well, Ken wasn't stupid. The 1 minute manager, he knows a little bit about people and what they do and how to manage relationships. And he did something absolutely brilliant. He pulled these kids aside. He called them on the phone first and said, I want to meet you before practice. Meet me at 31 Flavors. So they met at Baskin and Robbins, he and the other coach. And these two kids walk in trying to figure out what's going to go on. Every other team they've ever gotten on, they said, well, we know you're a troublemaker. You may be good, but you're not going to cause trouble on our team. That's not what Ken did. Ken has different rules about how to deal with people. He pulled them in and said, hey, what's your favorite ice cream? Got him a couple cones and said, you know what? I am so thrilled we got you guys because we weren't at the draft. We were lucky to get you. We know how skillful you guys are, and we want to make you guys our assistant coaches. You can imagine the response from these kids. What? Yeah, we need your help. We can't pull this thing off without you. We need your help to really make this thing fly. That's a different way of dealing with people, isn't it? So after setting up these kids as coaches, now they have all this self-esteem brewing within themselves, and they're setting up rules now. They start holding themselves to a higher standard. They start operating out of the rules that coaches have instead of the rules of troublemaking kids. Change them completely. Then Ken decided he was going to communicate to all the parents what the rules of the game were going to be on his team. So he asked all the parents to come to the first practice. And he said, we'd just like to share with you the goals that we have this year for the team so you can decide whether or not you want your kid to play on our team. And one parent said, well, our kid was assigned to your team. We don't really have a choice, do we? He said, well, of course you have a choice. Whatever you want to do, we just want you to be aware of how we're going to play. He said, we have 4 goals for this season. Goal number 1 is we want these kids to have great skills. We're going to definitely teach them to play soccer. And my assistant coach here is fantastic in that area. So we want them to be strong. Goal number 2, we want to teach these kids to play team. This is a team sport and life is a team sport. So we want them to understand they're not just an individual, but they got to interact with other people to win the big game. 3, we want to make sure these kids learn to be great sports. If your kid's got great skills, but he's a poor sport, he's going to have those skills on the bench. He's going to be sitting there because we won't have anybody in the team who's not a good sport. And 4th, we're going to have fun. Those are 4 goals for the season. We just want you to know what they are. One of the parents said, well, what about winning? And Ken looked at him and said, well, we're not about winning. That's not what we're doing it for. Well, you can imagine that violates a few people's rules who are involved in sports. He said, listen, we're going to win, but that's not what we're here to do. He said, we're here to teach these kids these first 4 skills. If we teach kids really the skills of soccer, we teach them to play team, we teach them to be good sports, we teach them to have fun. He said, we're going to beat a lot of teams. But he said, winning is a byproduct. It is not our goal. Well, some people got real upset about it. But at least they knew the rules up front. They got a chance to adjust to it. And you know what happened? They went undefeated that year. In fact, they had one game where the assistant coach wasn't there, and Ken didn't even know how many periods there were in soccer. And he said it was so funny. He was getting a little bit stressed about the idea, and he arrived at the soccer field, and guess who met him in the parking lot? His 2 assistant coaches. They said, Mr. Blanchard, we know you're probably worried about this, but don't worry. We'll handle things today. See, if you let people know the rules up front, you can have a lot of fun. If people's expectations are clear and are simple, we can all win the game of life. Start thinking of new rules, new ways of responding that empower you and the people around you. Here's point number 6. Too many must rules create a tremendous amount of stress, both for yourself and other people. Let me give you a classic illustration of this. Think of the rules that we had in our society for women, say 20 years ago. The overall rules of what did it take to be successful? Well, most people would offer some set of rules that would sound something like, well, what you must do really, a lot of things you could do or should do, but what you must do is take care of your family, make sure they're in great shape. Is that the only must rule that women have given themselves in today's society? No way. Women today have to be super women. They have to do everything and be perfect at it all. They got to not just take care of their family and their friends, but they got to have the perfect body. They got to contribute. They got to stop nuclear war. And they got to be the ultimate business person on top of all the above. I mean, think about that. Do you think that might create a little stress in your life, having that many musts in order for you to feel successful? And women aren't the only ones in our society. Our children today are under tremendous stress because of the expectations. And a lot of them have just decided there are too many musts. I'm out of here. I'm not going to do anything. And they cop out. See, if we get too many musts, we just want to leave. We don't want to play the game anymore. We lose our enthusiasm and our passion for life. See, high self-esteem comes from feeling like you have control over events, not that events have control over you. And when you have this many must rules, the chances of them being violated is great. You're not going to feel like you're in charge of your life. You're going to feel like you're in reaction. I'll never forget the advice I heard given by 20 families, all of which had quintuplets. This is a program on CNN. And they asked each of the parents, what has been the most important thing you've learned that's given you guys sanity throughout this time? And the one message that was echoed again and again was simply this: don't have too many rules. Because with this many bodies in motion, this many different personalities, all at the same time, if you got too many rules, you're going to go crazy, because the law of averages says they're going to be violated constantly, and you're going to be in stress, being in reaction to all this stuff. And I thought, well, it doesn't just work with quintuplets, it probably works in life. If you really want to succeed, make it so you don't have too many must rules. Have a few shoulds. Make the must the ones that are worth giving yourself pain for if you don't follow through. The ones you want to make sure you follow through on. And other ones, make them shoulds or coulds and create a life that has a little bit more space for yourself. And here's our final point, point 7. Make sure you have plenty of must rules. How's that for a nice contradiction? But the point is this: we need some must rules to make sure we'll follow through, that we'll take action. Remember the example we talked about earlier. Anybody who is fit, anybody who's healthy has some pretty strong must rules about how they got to eat, how they got to live, how they have to exercise. So we all need some structure. We all need something. The human spirit needs to resist against something that causes us to be stronger. And rules can be that context. They can get us to follow through. They can get us to cause ourselves to grow and expand. And what rules really are, again, are personal standards. And if we don't have any standards for ourselves, we won't expand. So life is a balance. You don't want too many must rules, nor do you want to go without them. Now, I've dumped a ton on your brain here in this session, this idea of rules, so remember what they are. Rules are your personal standards. They're your beliefs about what you must do or should do in order to feel a certain way, in order to experience something. They tell you when to feel good and when to feel bad. So here's your assignment. Sit down and write down, what does it take in order for you to feel successful? Answer the question thoroughly. 2, what does it take for you to feel loved? And by the way, it may be different by your kids than it is by, let's say, your spouse. 3, what does it take for you to feel confident? 4, what does it take for you to feel like you're excellent at something? As you answer those questions, I then want you to look at those rules and ask yourself this question: are these rules appropriate? Have I made it really hard to feel good and real easy to feel bad by having like 29 things that have to occur simultaneously for me to feel successful? If that's true, change your rules. Come up with a definition that empowers you. Something that will make you grow, but something that you're in control of. Make it easy to feel good. I'll tell you a way to start out phrasing your new rules. Start out with a phrase, anytime I. See, not after I do 29 things, anytime I. So for example, what it takes for me to feel loved is anytime I'm being loving, I feel love in my life. You know what's great about that rule? I'm in control. I get to ring the bell. I can at any moment make myself feel loved by just being loving. I'm in charge of that. That's easy. It's simple. It's a winnable game. So ask yourself, what does it take for you to feel these feelings? Look at those rules, and if they're inappropriate, change them. And thirdly, have some fun. Go to some polling. Go find out what people's rules are around you. For example, notice what your relationship with someone. You're a father, you're a mother, and you want to find out what your children's rules are for you. That might be interesting to find out. Kids have rules for you just like you have rules for your kids. For example, I'll never forget the first day I tried this with my son Joshua. I said, Josh, what must a dad do or be for his son? He looked at me kind of funny and said, what do you mean? I said, well, for me to be a great dad, or for a dad to be a great dad as a whole, what must the dad do or be? And he thought for a moment, he kind of smiled, and he said, well, a dad must love his son. I said, okay, what else? He said, well, a dad must really care about his son. I said, okay. He said, a dad must really be there for his son when his son needs him. I said, okay. And all those were things I expected. I said, what else must a father do or be in order to be a great dad? He said, well, in order to be a great dad, a dad must not tell his son all the answers on his homework. I said, what? That was a rule I didn't know he had. And I said, why is that? He said, well, because if your dad tells you the answers all the time, then you'll never figure out the answers for yourself, and someday you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. He told me this when he was 9 years old. I thought, pretty perceptive, pretty amazing. I said, well, what should a dad do? He had a lot of shoulds. And I said, what shouldn't a dad do? He said one of his shouldn'ts was a dad shouldn't take his son to the video arcade and let him play games all the time. I said, oh, he shouldn't do that, huh? I said, I noticed that isn't a must not, that's just a shouldn't. And he kind of laughed. But it was interesting to hear. And you know what? When I asked him, what must a mother do or be for her son, he had different rules for moms than he did for dads. And one of his rules for moms was, a mom must tickle her son's feet every single night she's home. I said, that's a must? He said, yeah. You know why? Becky has always tickled his toes since he was a baby, and he links that to love. So if we're home and he doesn't get his toes tickled, he doesn't feel like she's being a great mom. It's funny, the little rules that we have inside. I said, well, let me ask you about you. What must a son do or be in order to be a great son with his parents? He said, well, a son must be loyal, a son must have good manners, a son must be loving, a son must be giving. I said, what must a son never do with his family? He said, well, a son must never do drugs. I thought, wow, I'm glad that's a must never and it's not a maybe or a should not. I said, what else must a son never do? He said, a son must never commit suicide. He could have knocked me over with a feather. I said, wow. He's 9 years old. We've never talked about this. He's saying a son must never commit suicide. I didn't know how to handle it at first, but I thought, you know what? I'm really glad that's a must never. For some people, it's a shouldn't. And that's why some people aren't here. For him to commit suicide would be massive pain. He's got that at 9 years old. How fantastic. See, we all have rules, whether we know it or not. They're governing our thinking. Go do some exploration. I remember one time when we started talking about this, Becky was feeling kind of down and out because we got in late for Halloween and she hadn't had time to like decorate the castle and put up streamers and all that kind of stuff. And she was feeling like she wasn't being a good mom. She was really beating herself up. And I said, you know, honey, you do everything. You work so hard. You contribute so much. I said, why don't you give yourself a break? I said, you know what? You're doing all this stuff because you think you must do it, like you have to, like it's a rule. But is it your rule or is it the kids' rules? I said, do you think they must have it? She said, yes, they've always had it. That's how they know. It's how they know I care. I said, why don't you go take a poll? Why don't you go ask them, what must a mom do at Halloween for them to feel like it's a great Halloween? You know what? Their rules have changed as they've gotten older. Our rules do change as we live our lives. And you know what? Becky found out that these weren't their rules. These were her rules. She felt like she had to do things in order to feel like she was a great mom. And you know what? She finally just got off of it. And she didn't need to do that. We did other things that made the kids really feel fulfilled. The same thing at Christmas time. We have some people that sometimes come and visit with us at Christmas, and now what we do is we find out what are their rules for Christmas. What has to happen for you to feel like this is a great Christmas? Some people have to like sing songs. Some people have to like make cookies. We're not into cookies, but we did that with somebody because that's what makes them feel loved. That's their rule for that. For some people, they don't celebrate Christmas. They celebrate Hanukkah. It's a whole different frame. And obviously we want to meet their rules. And what we do is we get together and try and meet everybody's rules so everybody's happy. You can't do it always. But if you're conscious and you know what the rules are, you can win. If you don't know the rules, you're guaranteed to lose. You're going to violate them. If you understand people's needs, you can meet them, and every relationship in your life will be expanded. Understanding rules can allow you to eliminate most of the pain in your life and increase the pleasure.